Been a
Be here all
partner
day.
care provider, software and hardware product manager, managed events, done large-scale interactive art installations, and also startup founder. Now with Emergency Makers Network, he's on a mission to enable medical professionals anywhere in the world to place requests for critical supplies made from medically reviewed open source designs that can get automatically matched with a fabricator in their distributed network. Nathan, it's a pleasure to have you here. Over to you.
Thank you so much. It's so good to see so many familiar faces. Barbara, Tom, Barry, I don't think we've actually met, but I've been in the helpful engineering Slack since day 1 or 2 and had a number of conversations with your people. Everyone else I haven't met yet, but it's a pleasure to meet you. Thanks for having me here. So let's see. I do not want to be the wet blanket here, but I feel like that's important in all these conversations to talk about, in addition to what has worked, we also need to talk about what hasn't, because the situation that we're in doesn't get easier from here. You know, this is we'll start with some depressing real talk, and then we'll move into why it's hopeful later. So the last 5 years or so, I've been, along with some folks like Christina, at this very niche intersection of open source hardware, distributed manufacturing, disaster resilience, and the maker movement. There's, the tiny Venn diagram, and there's like 12 of us. And so when all of this hit with COVID in a couple months ago, /8 million years ago, whatever time is, suddenly I was like, oh, okay, this is what I've been thinking about all these years. Let's do this. And I've watched groups like Helpful Engineering, Open Source Medical Supplies, Get Us PPE, all these amazing groups come together and instantiate, kind of out of thin air, a distributed supply chain to meet the gaps left by the global supply chain breaking down. And amazing work has been done. And also the reality that we have to face is that it has barely moved the needle. Millions of units of PPE have been delivered, but also been plagued by, kind of gross inefficiencies, lack of coordination, people making things that aren't needed, people designing things that already exist, people delivering things that aren't wanted. I've seen this time and again. I've worked with people across this entire spectrum, and the work is being done, but it's not being done with sort of internal awareness. So a lot of what I've been doing is basically coming from looking at, these two realities. One is, this is the first wave of COVID. There are several more to come before any of us can really go back to anything like normal, if that happens at all. We've got a massive global financial crisis barreling down at us, food supply chain disruption, not to mention climate change. Like the difficulty of this game goes up from here. So what we're doing now is a great start, but it is not nearly enough. And I see this as an opportunity for us to take these things that we're developing in crisis response, held together with duct tape and baling wire, and build something durable and flexible that will be ready for the next crisis, not just something that we build in a panic on the fly again from scratch. Most of the conversations that we're having now are the same conversations we had 6 years ago in the Ebola outbreak, and all of those learnings have been lost. I don't want the things that we've learned this time to be lost for the next one. So given that, try to rein it in, I know we're kind of mindful of time. A lot of what I've seen basically falls into this framework. We have this supply chain that we're trying to instantiate in a way that is distributed and equitable and organic. That supply chain needs 5 main layers. We have design, we have documentation and review, we have demand aggregation, we have distributed manufacturing, and delivery logistics. Groups like Helpful Engineering at the design level are actually just taking needs from the community and generating new designs. We have groups like Open Source Medical Supply that are actually medically vetting those designs and improving the documentation standard to a point where it can be passed off to be fabricated without much back and forth. We have groups like Viral Response, and Get Us PPE, and all of these sort of grassroots community organizations that have sprung up, managing their community's needs directly and doing distribution at that endpoint, but aggregating what is needed from hospitals and healthcare workers into these big spreadsheets. groups like Xometry and Zverse that are doing distributed manufacturing really well, and groups like PPE Logistics that are handling the delivery and logistics side. However, none of these groups are really talking to each other. They don't have visibility into each other's process. And in many cases, I've seen people trying to recreate an entire supply chain, starting from the one thing they know how to do well, and rapidly tapering off into things that they don't do well because they aren't aware of the other folks doing it. What I want to see, what I'm trying to build with Emergency Maker Network, is a meta system, something that takes people who are already doing this piece well and that piece well, and actually stitching them together in a way that is, meaningfully coordinated, and in a way that doesn't require, volunteers with spreadsheets to make it happen. So an example of what that would look like. There's one thing right now that every one of these layers touches, and it's something that all of us here have something to do with: the open source design itself. That is, so I think the flow that we're looking at, just to kind of walk you through it and get a little less abstract. So imagine if all of the designs that we're working with, from inception to delivery in the physical world, were machine readable and writable. Not just a Google Doc or a PDF somewhere, but something machine readable, writable. So the minute Helpful Engineering publishes it, it gets, the documentation team is like, okay, new design is in, put it through its tests, see if this is rigorous, can this work, is this medically necessary, is this medically safe? Gets published into the next repo. Now demand aggregation, all the community organizers know that this is a new design that has been approved. They can start putting it on their systems. The distributed manufacturing systems get updated with this design. They can feedback and say, okay, this is good, but this isn't production ready. These feedback loops start to show up. Now that things are being fabricated, the people who are like, that this specific version of this design was created by this person is being made in these quantities at these places and being delivered to these people, who can then feedback and say, okay, well, this thing works, but it doesn't work here, fix this thing, and that goes back. You can actually close the entire loop. Right now, we don't have this visibility. We have people sort of shouting into the void and talking with, hundreds or maybe thousands of people in their community on their platform that they have visibility to, but the millions and millions of other people they don't have visibility to, they can't reach. So what I want to see is honestly built on a lot of the work that, Tom, you and I did last year in Warsaw, like the open know-how standard that we helped develop. This is the use case it was created for. So I've been pushing for adoption of that, to try to get everybody to actually start using a machine readable, writable framework for these designs. If we can do that, I think we can actually start moving the needle. We can start stitching these things together, because the scale of this problem is not solvable by any one organization. We need to work together on this, and we need to be better at it than we are, because we're going to need to do it a lot more.
Thanks a ton, Nathan.